Hi, this is Jeff with FrostyGarden.com, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. This video might not be for everyone, but for people who are seeking this kind of information, it will hopefully be very helpful. And today's topic is how we do our annual maintenance on our Honda FG110 tiller. This is something that we do every single year. For us, we do our maintenance in the fall, but you can also do this in the spring, and generally speaking, you need to do your maintenance so that you can keep your tiller running in top shape and keep it from failing you when you need it the most in the spring. So let's go ahead and get started. Before we get too far into this, the most important thing that you're going to need is the user's manual for your tiller. And this comes with the tiller, but if you have misplaced it for any reason, you can download the manual for your tiller online very, very easily. Just search for Honda FG110 Owner's Manual, and you'll find it. And specifically, you need the section about servicing the tiller. So make sure you have this, as this will cover everything that we're doing step by step, and we're just going to show you what we're doing from the manual. When you look over the manual, one of the first things that you're going to see is the maintenance schedule. And this basically tells you when you need to be doing all of these different things and how frequently they need to be done, whether they're checking, cleaning, or replacing the items that you are maintaining. We do disagree with some of what's in here. For example, they have you doing an oil change literally every 6 months, and we do not use our tiller enough in order to justify that frequent of a maintenance. If you were heavily using your little mini tiller, you would definitely want to consider something more aggressive, but we just do it once a year, and in general, we do all of this once a year, regardless of what's shown on the maintenance schedule. So we're going to start with the air filter because it takes the longest for it to be cleaned and properly oiled. And what you want to make sure of is that your choke here is in the top position. And what you'll find is back behind here, there's a couple of clasps that you need to loosen. And I like to use a little tool for this. And basically it allows you to pull this piece off. And this is your actual air filter. Now, this is not a generally replaceable air filter. This is a cleanable air filter, and so you can actually put this in soapy water and clean it out, and then you put new oil on it in order to allow it to filter. So I'm going to go grab some soapy water, and I'll show you what we're going to do. Okay, now that we have some soapy water, we first want to generally inspect our filter and just make sure that it's good and clean and generally is not broken or torn apart. And this is just a soapy water mix. This is specifically Dawn dish soap that I've got in here. And basically you're going to kind of squeeze it together and clean it out. And in general, just try to get all the contaminants that might be in there out. If your filter is really clean, there's really not a need to do this cleaning. I generally do it anyway, but it's not necessarily required if your filter's clean. If your filter is tattered or broken, you do need to replace it. You can find these replacement filters. Just look for the model number and air filter, and you can order one if you need it. Once your filter's clean, you want it to dry out a little bit. So I just set this aside. This is why I start with this, is so this guy has a little bit of time to dry properly. Okay, next we are going to start with the oil change while our filter is drying. So you want your tiller in this position. So the carry handlebars are down low here, and you'll notice that this is your oil dipstick here. So you're going to unscrew that, and this is also how you would check the oil if you needed to do that. But it's also where you drain out the oil. So I'm going to grab a little container to catch the oil here. Okay, and I'm just using my container that I had, and you're going to set this dipstick aside here, and basically you just tip this out and drain the oil. There's not very much oil in this guy. It really doesn't use very much at all. And you basically want to get all the oil out. Alright, so once we've drained the oil and disposed of that properly, we are needing to fill it up with a new oil. In the owner's manual, it recommends 10W30. We really don't need a low winter weight because this is going to be a summer used device, and so 10W30 is generally something we would agree with, even in a cold climate where we live. We use synthetic, but you can also use conventional or dyno oil as well. You're also going to need a funnel, and you're going to place that guy in there, and you just kind of have to get this to a level. We'll show you what that looks like when we get there, but basically you're going to put a little bit of oil. You don't want to overfill this thing, and it's really easy to do. We've ended up doing that in the past, and you end up having to drain out oil. And again, we'll show you what this looks like once it's right. Okay, so we're going to show you what this looks like when it's right. And like I said, there's not a specified amount of oil. You do want to also, one thing I forgot to mention is make sure this is on a relatively flat space. But I take a flashlight, and basically what you're trying to do is get to the very, not the very top of this, but there's a little line in there. And in general, that's the correct fill point when the tiller is in this position. So once your oil is changed, then you want to put the dipstick back in. You can also use the dipstick to measure the amount of oil and whether it is overfilled or not. So that's another indicator that you can use to make sure that you get the right amount. To do that, you just seat it all the way and bring it back out. And you generally want that somewhere about halfway on the dipstick, which is exactly where it's at. So your annual maintenance period is a really good time to get any junk that you picked up in the spring out of the tines. And in general, what we like to use is a pair of either 90 or 45 degree needle nose pliers, and that allows you to get in there and pull a bunch of stuff out and also rip it out. So I'm going to go ahead and clean up these tines and make sure that they are clean and nice. Okay, and that's what it looks like with the tines cleaned up, and it's ridiculous how much stuff we get in the tines every year. I think this is because of our particular garden, but that is nice and clean. I'm also going to blast this with some compressed air here. I'm not going to show that, but you get the idea. It just helps clean it up a little bit more. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is check the spark plug, and we're just going to check it for health. I don't think we have to replace it this year, but you might want to do that. To get into it, you have to remove this 5mm hex bolt here, and for reference, that's the air filter. This is towards the back. This is called a fan shroud, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that. Okay, so once our fan shroud is open, then we can remove the spark plug wire here. And to get the spark plug out, you're going to need a 5/8 inch spark plug socket like that. And that will fit right over it perfectly. Okay, and let's remove the spark plug here. Okay, so once you have the spark plug out, you want to inspect it. And what you're really looking for is any kind of corrosion or where the metal is actually lost. You're also looking for gunk that might be around it. It is fairly normal to see black conditions because remember, this is literally under explosion from gasoline all the time. And so it's normal to see it black, but you're looking for any kind of oil buildup or anything like that. Then another important thing is to check the gap, and the gap is between that center pin and this piece that comes out, and to do that you use a gap tool, and this gap tool is going to measure in both freedom units as well as metric. And basically how you use this tool is you insert it in between, and what you're looking for is a specific measurement. And for this particular spark plug, the specification is between 0.6 and 0.7 millimeters. And you'll notice that is referenced here. And so what I want to do is try to fit this in, and sometimes it only fits in one way, and get it in between there and basically find out how thick that distance is. And if I look at this, that's right about 0.6 and maybe a little over 0.6, and so that's perfect. And so that spark plug is perfect to go back in. I think it's next year I've got to replace this spark plug. So to put the spark plug back in, we just hand tighten it. You definitely don't want to use a wrench at this stage because you run the risk of stripping the threads, and that's really, really bad. And you just finger tighten it all the way until it gets in. And then you're going to take your wrench again and just cinch it down. You don't want to do this too tight. This is an aluminum block and is very, very sensitive. Once you're done, go ahead and put your spark plug boot back on, and you finished your spark plug inspection. So while you're in here, some models will have what's called a spark arrestor here. My unit did not come with one, and it is not required in my state, but you might have a spark arrestor here, and if you do, then that sometimes needs some maintenance. Basically, there's a little screw that would be here if it had one. You undo that, and then you pull out the spark arrestor and just use some metal bristles to clean that up. The manual says about every 100 hours, so it's not a frequent maintenance, but if you have one, that is something that you'll want to do. So while you still have the cover open, one of the things you want to look at is these cooling fins here, and that's just right next to where the spark arrestor would be. And basically, there's a few fins in here. You just want to make sure there's no dirt lodged in there. If there is, go ahead and clean them up. Mine looks clean, and in general, that's not going to be something you run into very often. Okay, and once you are done with all of your internals, then what you want to do is you want to reinstall the fan shroud. And this only goes on one way. And once it fits in, it fits nice and good. You'll also notice that the hole lines up, and you want to take your 5mm bolt here, and you want to retighten it. Lightly tighten it. Doesn't need to be Herculean. Okay, so at this point in the process, your air filter should be reasonably dry. Now, before we install this, we need to put oil on this filter. And I like to use a foam filter oil. This is from Lucas. You can also use just plain motor oil, whatever suits your fancy. But basically what you're going to do is you're going to put a little bit of this oil on your oil filter, or your air filter, and you kind of want to work it into the air filter. This is a little bit of a dirty job, but someone's got to do it, as Mike Rowe likes to say. So we're going to do both sides here, get it nice and oiled up, and what this oil does is it prevents all the dirt and nasty stuff from getting into the filter. It also helps the filter last for a much longer period of time. So this only goes in one way. There are some keys here that will help you figure out where it needs to go, but basically you just put it in there and make sure it is fit in there nice and snug. And then once you're done with that, you can reinstall the cap for the air filter. So for one of the next steps, they're going to have you check the throttle here. This is something I do while I'm operating it and generally try to observe if there's any problems. There is a measurement you can use to check the play on this guy, and then you can also tighten or loosen that with the nut bolt here that is used to basically tighten or loosen the throttle. And one of the other things to check is the fuel system, and basically you just want to make sure that you don't have a dirty gas tank. If you do, there is a cleaning procedure, and I've already inspected this. There is no dirt or other contaminants in there, but you basically want to visually inspect that. And if you do have any kind of contaminants in there, then you want to go through the cleaning procedure described in the manual. But I try to keep dirt out of my gas tank, and that works best for me. And I forgot to mention, but one of the things that this unit features is an internal to the gas tank fuel filter, and that's generally something you don't have to replace or service unless you're having starting problems or fuel delivery problems. And if that's the case, that's definitely one of the very first things that you want to check, is to make sure that that fuel filter is not gummed up. If you are having starting problems, definitely you want to go through the fuel tank cleaning as well as replace the fuel filter with a new one. So okay, and one of the final stages that you need to do is to grease the transmission. So to do this, you have to remove the tines from the unit. And to do that, basically you pull out the securing clip. And once you get that out, then the tines will come off. And this right here is the fill hole. One of the things that I'm kind of annoyed about is that this doesn't have a proper zerk for using a grease gun. And so what they have you do is basically put the grease gun right up against this and then inject grease into there. I've thought about actually replacing this with a zerk, and so that would make greasing this a lot easier. I don't actually have my grease gun at the moment, so I can't perform this maintenance. I'm getting it back in a few days, but really, once you do this, then you can secure this back up. There's also another fill on the other side of this unit, so you have to take off both sides of the tines. And once you're done, then you go ahead and reinstall the tines in the order that you took them off. And then you re-secure with the clip. And that's pretty much all there is to the annual maintenance on our Honda FG110 Tiller. We hope that you found this video helpful, and if you have any questions, do feel free to go ahead and put them down below and we'll try to get back to you on them. We've absolutely loved this tiller, and it's been with us now for 8 or 9 years, and this annual maintenance that we do ensures that it's going to keep running for many, many years to come. It's a really easy job, and you can do it. You absolutely don't need to farm this out. I am not a trained mechanic. I just follow instructions and take my time and make sure that I get it done properly. And it's very inexpensive to do as well. So once again, I'm Jeff with FrostyGarden.com, and I want to thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time.